Rock on. I'm glad to hear that you guys are making progress. We're going to be digging a little bit more into our outlines. So we're going to give you a little bit more detail, and hopefully that'll get you some information to be able to proceed, because this is a 7-day challenge, meaning just 7 sessions, but you guys welcome to session 3. But this is a challenge. This is a challenge for you to get your project started, and depending on obviously the size of the project, get those projects finished, because I'm not going to be satisfied unless you're satisfied, right? I want you guys to finish your projects. I am so excited about the progress that I'm hearing. Some people have completed their projects already, so they must be just totally just going off, which is amazing. And I just want to help you guys be able to proceed. So it is just after 7 o'clock. And so we're going to dig into our cards, but I want to find out you guys this. How many of you guys worked this weekend? Because it's Monday morning right now. You worked this weekend? Awesome. How many of you guys went out, had a good time? Anybody? Awesome. Rock on. There's a reason for these questions. I hope you guys had a great weekend, a great work week, or days at work or whatnot, because I want to just share something with you, because this whole thing is about the easy approach to storytelling and screenwriting. The easy approach, meaning our experience, express, extract, and embody. And so whatever it is that you guys did this weekend, every single moment of every single day is a story to tell, okay? And I want you guys to start looking at things like that. And maybe you already do, but I just want to share that with you. Every single moment of every day, there is a story in that moment. It's whether we choose to stop and recognize those stories and stop and recognize those moments that we can utilize to be able to tell various stories based on our experiences, based on the lives that we're living. And every encounter that you had when you went to work, every encounter you had, whether you went out, every encounter you had, every person you connected with is a character. And you guys should start seeing them like that. Every moment of the day is a story, and every encounter that you had is with a character. And so some people, you got good characters, some people not so good characters, but you can look at them and say, dang, you're a character. And you could start to shape a story even around that moment, or you could start to shape a story around that particular person who you now see as a character. But I want to encourage you guys to embrace those moments, because just yesterday I went for a walk. And, I saw a penny on the ground, and I started to pick it up, because you know that saying about, find a penny, pick it up, and all day long you'll have a good luck, right? A lot of us have heard that, whatever. Or some people heard that, if it's heads, you're supposed to pick it up. If it's tails, it's bad luck, and then you're supposed to go and if it's tails, flip it around and leave it heads for the next person that comes along, or whatever. Anyway, but I thought about picking up that penny. And I was like, okay. And then a story started kind of going through my head. And whether this is a story that's already been told or not, doesn't matter. There are no new stories, guys. A lot of people are looking for originality, and that's great. You should be looking for your voice, okay? That's where your uniqueness comes in. That's where your individuality is going to come in. It's your unique voice, because Boy Meets Girl's already been told. Trying to win the race has already been told. Trying to overcome this has already been told. Trying to save the world has already been told. You can go through countless stories, and you go through the movies and go through the books. Those stories have been told, but now you have an opportunity to tell those stories. That's what makes it amazing for you. Finding your voice so that you can share a unique story or a unique perspective on something. So I don't know if this story has already been told, but a lot of people are needing ideas for little stories or whatever. But I said, I'm going to pick up that penny. And I said, I'm not going to pick up that penny, because if I pick up that penny, I'm going to get good luck. Something good's going to happen to me, but then something bad's going to happen to somebody that I care about. Now, I was just making that up. And then I'm like, oh, if I end up I automatically thought somebody's going to pull over right away. I was thinking in my head, somebody's going to pull over and they're going to give me something. They'll be like, hey, I just want you to have this or whatever. And then so I would take it, meaning it was taken away, like something is going to be taken away from somebody else that I care about, somebody that I'm close to, right? And then I started thinking about, oh man, I'm feeling a whole lot better. That means on the flip side, somebody that I care about is feeling a whole lot worse. And then so I started going just through these thoughts, these just random thoughts. And this is not something that I even really have to think about. It becomes automatic that I begin to tell stories in my head about encounters that I have or things that I'm just doing on a regular routine basis. And then I thought, okay, well, when all this good stuff happens, something bad's going to happen to somebody that I care about. How long am I going to keep that penny for when that revelation comes? You see what I mean? I cannot care. And now I'm dealing with a moral dilemma. Do I really care about the people in my life? Because now all these wonderful things are happening to me. I'm stronger. I got money. I got influence. All these different things are happening that are positive, but it's affecting and being taken away or sucking the life out of the people that I'm supposedly supposed to care about. So now I have a moral dilemma, Do I get rid of the penny? Whatever, So anyway, but that was just me walking down the street and seeing a penny on the ground, and all that stuff starts coming through my head. Now, again, whether that story's been told or not, doesn't matter to me. Now I have an opportunity to tell it. If I want to, I'm not going to tell that story, but if I wanted to, you see what I mean? Then that's something that I can look into and say, hey, I'm going to jot that down. That's just a little quick story, whatever. Anyway, so you guys have had your encounters all weekend. You guys have had your events. Yeah. You guys have gone to work. What's that? Somebody say something? But you guys have had your events, you guys have gone to work, and all those moments are things that you can think about in regards to stories that you can tell. Okay, man, I've been reading some crazy stuff on the news, and honestly, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but you can't really just take somebody's story, even if it happened to them. You can't really take somebody's story and say, I'm going to tell their story because you read it in the news. But you can come up with something similar. Change the characters around, but you can maybe look at the premise or whatever. So you can't really do that because you're violating somebody's rights, when you do that. But every time you read something, it's an opportunity if you say, I like that story. I'm going to tweak it. I'm going to twist it. I'm going to change it. I'm going to put my voice into it. And now you have a story. But you guys should see all these opportunities as stories for you to be able to tell. There is no lack of ideas that are out there, especially when you use your experiences and your life. Okay. Now, anybody have any questions on that? That was just kind of just a little bit of extra, because I had fun this weekend. Anybody have any questions? Anybody? All right. So we're going to dig into our cards a little bit more. So I started filling out just a little bit more notes on those cards, and I'm going to show those to you on the screen. And we're going to dig into that to help you guys through the process of getting your outlines done. But how many of you guys already have your story ideas? That's important because we're 3 classes in, and I want to make sure you guys have an idea of something that you want to work on. So how many of you guys already got that idea? You got your protagonist, you got your antagonist, rock on, awesome. And you know what's at stake. Really, those are the 3 elements that you need. What's my protagonist wanting to do? What's my antagonist and how is he coming against my protagonist? And what's at stake if the protagonist fails? That's it. We make things so complicated. Seriously, doesn't matter how many books you read, they're all going to say the same thing in different ways. They're going to say the same thing in their unique voice to ultimately say your protagonist trying to do something, your antagonist is trying to come against them, and what's at stake if the protagonist fails. Okay, so we're going to look at our cards and we're going to start to dig into those a little bit more. And again, I want to say they're in no particular order, because I don't want nobody looking at these cards and says, this dude sucks because he's got this over here and this after here. No, I'm just making notes on the cards because I'm going to give you those cards and then you could say, oh, okay. Oh, okay. And just a reminder. So I'm not trying to put anything in any particular order. So everybody got that? Give me a thumbs up just to let me know, because I don't want you all looking at me like you got a dumb teacher. Stop listening to that guy, because you don't. You got a good teacher. Somebody that loves story and somebody that loves to teach. So rock on. We're going to go through these cards real quick. But again, anyway, the three act structure is something that I use. Some people call it a 4-act structure, but it's the exact same thing. They're just not Act 2A and then Act 2B. If they're doing a 4-act structure, they're going the setup, Act 1, Act 2 for the conflict or confrontation. Then they have a second part, that they're making separate, and then they have act 3. So the 3-act structure, we just combine the confrontation and the conflict phase. That's it. That's the only difference. So that's just semantics. We're all talking about the same thing. Other people use different structures, but here's the thing. There is a structure to good storytelling, and we need to get that on the inside of us. There is a structure to good storytelling. And at the foundation of it, it really, in my honest opinion, all goes back down to the 3-act structure. Why? Because it's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everybody got that? The 3-act structure, that's what it is. A beginning, a middle, and an end. It's our setup, our confrontation or conflict, and our resolution. That is your 3-act structure, okay? And guess what? The whole world is used to that. The whole world. You can be different if you want. That's awesome. Go be different. Go be unique. But I'm telling you, when you find a basis for good storytelling, what happens is you increase your audience. You increase your reach because people want to hear good stories. So you can be unique and you can be twisted and you can be this, have your own voice. You can do all of that. But there's going to be quite a few people that are not used to that structure. So you can't freak out because people don't want to listen to your unique and blended and this kind of story. You can't be, because we're all used to a 3-act structure. We're all used to it. We have our beginning, our middle, and our end, our setup, our confrontation, and our resolution. That's normal. We have our sunrise, day, and what happens next? Sunset. 3-act structure, right? We have morning, we have afternoon, and we have evening or night. 3-act structure. You guys get what I'm saying? We're used to that in storytelling. So when you're utilizing that knowledge of understanding that people are accustomed to that type of structure, you're able to be creative within the confines of that structure, not formula. Because I can show you, if we have time, I'll show you an example of formula. If you're writing for Hallmark, see how I get excited and I just go, if you're writing for Hallmark, they expect a formula for you to follow. And if you're venturing outside that formula, they will not take your movie. Okay? So I just want something to understand. There's nothing bad about formula. If something works for something and for someone, then you do what's going to work for them. Otherwise, you don't have a job. But Hallmark has certain benchmarks that they expect you to meet at certain times and certain actions that take place. And if you don't do that, then you're operating outside of the realm that they want you to operate in, and therefore your story will not work for them. They have a formula that they really want you to follow. It's just the way that it is. It's not good or bad. It just is what it is. We follow the 3-act structure, at least at the foundation, okay? Because guess what happened? You guys said, hey, some of us went to work this weekend. Awesome. Some of us went out, had a good time this weekend. Awesome. Guess what you did? You left, you had your little adventure, or you worked, and guess what you did? You returned home. 3-act structure, storytelling, right there. Rock on. So, awesome. So we're going to go over what good storytelling is. Good storytelling is letting us know. See how excited I get? Oh my gosh. I couldn't even sleep last night because of you guys. Seriously. Anyway, rock on. But 3-act structure. We have our beginning, middle, and end. We introduce our characters. Let people know who it is and what they're doing or whatever. Yes, you can add some suspense. And yes, you can, hide some things, veil some things. But we expect you to introduce us to the people that we're going to be following along. And then we expect the conflict. And we expect a resolution of somehow. But at the basis and at the bottom of every story we tell, you're going to have that type of structure. So we're going to look at that and just keep in mind that, again, they just are my notes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pull this up real quick. All right. Can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Wow. I don't see my picture this time. So fantastic. So you guys all see where it says Act 1 setup, 15 to 30 pages, right?
No.
What's that? So you guys said you all see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so this is what I do when I first start off. Okay, obviously the cards are completely blank when we're starting off. Okay, I just wrote these notes up here for you guys, but we have our act 1, our act 2, which is 2 portions, and then we have our act 3. Okay, so this is our setup phase, right? And I want you guys to really think about this. When you guys grab these cards, you're literally talking about having your movie. This is your story. Okay, I keep saying movie, but this is your story. This is your story done. Just like a sculptor, a master sculptor, he's going to take that hunk of clay and he's going to take out those elements that are not the image that he wants to present. For us, we're going to start off with these blank cards. And once all these cards are filled in, we have our story complete. It's as simple as that. Please don't make it any more difficult than that, because it's not more difficult than that. You're going to fill them in just like a puzzle piece. Okay. So this is just how I start off. Okay. With these things. Now I'm going to move over to another card and listen. When you are working on the outline for your story, you only really need 3 elements to get your story going. Just 3. Okay. How your story starts. Okay. Your inciting incident. And remember, we did talk about this. This is that moment where something significant happens that impacts your protagonist, your main character. And this is where your story really starts right here. Okay. Because that sends them on their journey to meet their dramatic need, whatever it is that they got going on, whatever it is that they want, whatever it is they desire, whatever it is that need needs to be met. It starts really here. Okay. That sends them on their quest. And then look, the third element is how your story is resolved. Okay. Can anybody guess as to why I put it up here and not here? Want to take a guess?
Because there's still more after it.
Anti-climax. So, was it that?
What's that? Say one more time.
How story resolves is the climax, right? And
The climax, you said?
Yeah.
Yes,
but
yes.
After that, the anti-climax that goes to the story again, to the end.
Gotcha. Right. Now, see here, this is just simply the last scene in your film or your story. The last scene or the sequence, the end of your story. The resolution to your story may not happen on the last scene, because that's what this card is for. These individual cards are a scene or a sequence that you're going to jot down. Okay. So you're going to jot down something here that's going to lead you to here. That's going to lead you to here. So when we get here, the reason why I didn't put it on the last card is because not every film is resolved in the last scene of the movie or your story. Okay. You can have your resolution here where everything is tied up and then just have a couple more scenes afterwards. So remember what I said, this is in no particular order. You can have your resolution to your film here and then still have other scenes that you're needing to fill, because this is just the last sequence or scene of your film or the end of your story. Doesn't necessarily mean that your resolution happens on the last scene. Does that make sense? All right. I wish I could see you guys. I can't see you guys. I'm just only looking at these cards. Bummer. But okay, but that all made sense, right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Now I'm going to move on to this one, which I filled out a little bit more. And so now we're going to get some more into detail, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time on these particular cards here. Okay. Again, they're in no particular order. I just wanted to jot down notes so that once you get these cards, you'll be able to find them in the Legacy Street Writers group. Once you get these cards, it's just going to give you some reminders. Maybe you're jotting down notes and stuff, and you'll be able to look at these things and just kind of get an idea of what's going on and stuff. So this stuff that's in this area are not necessarily all, well, this applies to setup, but then I just jotted down more notes here, just kind of jotted some brief notes here. So anyway, we're just going to go through these and we'll get as far as we can in this. Okay. So act 1 because we're dealing with a 3-act structure. Act 1 is our setup, and it's 15 to 30 pages. Okay, and I want you guys to think about this. It's 15 to 30 pages. Act 2 is 30 to 60 pages, and Act 3 is 15 to 30 pages. So that gives us 90 to 120 minutes for, if we're writing a film, a feature film, for our feature film. If you're writing a novel, this will complete your novel, depending on how you write, okay? Because I've used this outline for novels as well as obviously writing feature films. So if I slip and just keep referring to movies, this applies to novels as well, okay? And so here we go with setup. Setup. Remember, these are the 3 elements that we need to do our outline. So if you already have not started outlining yet, these are the things you need. You need how your story starts, You need your inciting incident. And then you need how your story is going to be resolved. Then the rest of the elements, you're just going to piece together like a puzzle. Remember, plot, cause, and effect. When something happens, it's going to trigger something else happening, which going to trigger something else happening, so that's just going to bring us down our cards one by one, okay? So how your story is going to start. In the setup phase is where we're going to introduce our main characters, okay? This is our protagonist and our antagonist. They should show up, or you should see glimpses of our antagonist, but you need to introduce these characters. And what I should have wrote down, and I'm just thinking about it now, is you have to have your reader hooked. You got 10 pages, and often in all reality, it's less than that, okay? You got 10 pages basically to get to this inciting incident. And it's best to do this as close as possible to the start of your actual story, okay? In all reality, you need to try to hook your reader or your audience right away as soon as you possibly can. But the general rule is within 10 pages, your inciting incident should happen. Now, longer screenplays, like the ones that are bordering 110, 115, 120 pages, those are long screenplays, then maybe it takes them a little bit longer to set up, okay? But you want to have your inciting incident happen as close to the story, as the start of your story as possible, okay? And obviously setup is for us to introduce our main characters. Okay, how many of you guys have seen that movie Jaws?
Yes.
Anybody recall what the first scene is? Can you tell me just real quick? First scene in Jaws, anybody? Okay, the first scene in Jaws, they're at a party, right? One girl strips, jumps into the water, waiting for her man to come out, and guess who comes out? The antagonist. So someone had asked a question earlier in our chats about, you know, how soon can you introduce your antagonist? Well, we saw our antagonist in Jaws before we even saw our protagonist. The girl goes out there, she's swimming in the water, and then you guys know what happens if you've seen the movie, okay? And that antagonist is the shark. Can anybody else, if you saw the movie, think about another antagonist for our protagonist? If you liked Jaws at all. Yeah, okay. I can't see anybody, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer the question. The water
mayor.
itself, what's that?
The mayor.
Well, the mayor, absolutely. He was another antagonist opposing our protagonist. That's good. That's wonderful. And also the water itself, because the protagonist had a fear of water. See? So your antagonist obviously doesn't have to necessarily be a person like the mayor was, but your character, your antagonist could also be that shark in Jaws, and it can also be an element like he was afraid of water. Okay, so there you go, an introduction of our antagonist even before we even meet our protagonist. Now, this is a movie that I like, and people are borderline, love it or hate it or whatever, but I liked Armageddon. I like that movie. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I like that movie. Who was the antagonist, or what was the antagonist in that movie?
The asteroid.
The asteroid. And when did we meet the asteroid? You guys remember, like, the opening sequence, they talked about the dinosaurs, great. and then we go into space. They're doing a little spacewalk, and guess what? Start hitting that shuttle. Pieces of that asteroid. So here we have an introduction of our antagonist even before our protagonists are introduced. Okay, does that make sense? So you can bring your antagonist in as soon as you possibly want to. Does anybody have any questions?
I have my antagonist coming in on page 2, but we don't know he's the antagonist yet.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Because in a lot of projects, we are led to believe someone is the antagonist. We think that we got him pegged, and we know who that antagonist is. And then later on, we find out we got it wrong. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. That is wonderful. Okay. And so a lot of times this inciting incident happens right there at the very opening of the film. Okay. It really sets the story in motion. It throws the protagonist's life out of balance, even if he doesn't know it. Starts off with like an example that I had before, or I said a bank robbery happens or whatever. And then you get a call that says, hey, there's a hostage situation. So something like that. But your inciting incident should happen as close to the start of your story as possible. Okay. That's what I wrote right here. Okay. Here, your outline is for action and events, no dialogue. Now, me, just as a side note, if I get a piece of dialogue that I want to keep, that I don't want to lose, I will just get a regular pen so it doesn't take an emphasis away from me highlighting my outline. I'll just take a regular pen and then jot it on the back if I don't want to lose a piece of dialogue that I think is golden. Okay. But when you're doing your outline, it is only for you to list a scene or a sequence of your story or your film or your television show as briefly as possible. Just a statement that indicates to you what scene or sequence goes there. This is not a place for dialogue, but if you get a piece of dialogue, if you want to just follow, what I do, then I just jot it on the back of my cards just so it doesn't take away from the outline format. Okay. All right. This next note, because obviously these are just notes. Okay. But this next note, feature film script is between 90 and 120 pages. All right. The sweet spot is about 100 to 110 pages. For new screenwriters, you want to stay away from 120, even 115 if you can avoid it. For new screenwriters, because it's going to be hard enough for you to be able to get your stuff looked at when you're staying on the lower end. But if you're hanging out at the 120 page mark, then production companies and producers, they don't want to mess with people. They don't want to take a chance in investing in a 120 page script from someone that they do not know. And that honestly is a general rule that you should look at. If you're not an established writer, you want to try to stay away from the 120 page mark. 115 pages, I guess, would be fine. But again, people, your decision makers, your influencers, your money people, they do not typically want to invest in a new writer, an unseasoned writer, if their screenplays are on the higher end of the spectrum. Okay. With that being said, how many pages should my story be? How many pages should my screenplay be? They should be long enough to effectively tell your story. Okay. That is the rule that you go by. You need to tell your story no matter how many pages that it takes. Now, if you end up at 120, 130, 140 pages, because I read about it all the time, then we need to figure out how we can reduce that and how we can better tell your story. But you utilize as many pages as you need to effectively tell your story. Rock on. Everybody got that?
Yep.
Anybody have any questions on that?
I feel
Nope.
that I've noticed in my last screenplay class, they had broken up action, like no chunks, like it was just sort of beat, well, not even beat. Like camera, it's the idea of what she sits and looks, then it says what she's looking at, because you're sort of guiding the camera without doing camera actions.
Yes.
But each separate line takes up space.
Right.
And I'm like, wait, now I'm like, oh my God, too many, I don't know, too much space and not enough stuff, but I'm trying to follow their guidelines, trying to be the amateur with the blocks of action, description, and try to break it up. What do we do? What is?
You know what? We can get you dialed in on that. There is someone that was in my last class, and I'm amazed when people that are they are storytellers and they are writers, when they join my class and they're like, wow, that was awesome. And I read their writing and I'm like blown away at how good it is. I'm excited that you just got something, from the class. But just to what you were saying, there was a lady in my last class and she's an amazing writer. And she is, her stuff is so trimmed down. Okay. I kind of borderline on, obviously I'm writing what's taking place, but I like to add my flavor to it, my own way of being able to tell my story. All right. That she is just like pretty much by the book, and her writing is so amazing. But later on, we will talk about how we can utilize that tool of kind of influencing what happens, because in your screenplay, if you're writing a spec script and if this is not a shooting script, and I'll tell you what the difference is, but if you're writing a spec script, there's no camera angles that should be in there, which you probably already know. And but to influence what the audience is seeing or what the reader is seeing, we can phrase things a certain way. And I think that kind of goes along with what you were talking about, is trying to influence the camera without actually putting in, this is the camera's POV or whatever. But I like to be able to do that, but I do it wisely and sparingly. And actually, I do it enough. I do it when I want to. So, that's the truth. I do it when I want to. But I think I got it dialed in for me. But yes, so moving right along. So one page in your screenplays, your features or your 60-minute pilots, one page represents 1 minute of screen time. Okay. These are just notes. You'll get these obvious notes. Just if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay. So if your 90-minute script is for the most part going to be a 90-minute film. All right. So one page is about 30 seconds for sitcoms. That's why you see the numbers that are in the, oh, wait a minute, if that's a 48-page sitcom or 40-page sitcom, how are they fitting it into a 22 or 28-minute time slot? Is because the timing on your screen, the screen timing is factored differently for sitcoms because things move a lot faster. Okay, those jokes go back and forth a lot faster. Okay, so they represent, one page is about 30 seconds of screen time. All right. For you guys that are writing a novel, I put the average page count on here for you guys, because I did see some people that are wanting to work on books. So your novel should be about 80,000 to 100,000 words. And a novel is about minimum of 50,000 words. So if you're writing a novel, this is this is your word count for you. And there are specifics when it comes to whether you're writing a romance novel, whether you're writing a thriller, whether you're writing a sci-fi. So you want to look into those things specifically. I can give you the numbers if you want to just ask that question later. But every time when you're writing a story, you're going to have to make sure that your manuscript, if you're looking at writing a book, your manuscript is going to have to line up with where you're sending it to. They're going to have specifics in regards to how they want your manuscript formatted. So I just want you guys to hear that. It's the same thing with you guys that are writing television shows, a 60-minute television show, a 30-minute television show. If you're writing along a certain genre or in hopes of writing for a specific television show, you have to go and look at how they format their episodes. Okay. And so we'll get there in a minute. Actually, we'll get there in a minute, but there's specifics to you that I can't give you generalities. Okay. You have to kind of look at the shows that you're wanting to try to do, and you can find out how your screenplay and is supposed to be structured for your 60-minute TV and for your 30-minute televisions. Okay. In Act 1, we're still in our setup phase. In Act 1, We need to introduce the genre. People should know the feel of your movie, whether you're shooting a comedy or I keep saying movie, but you guys, I hope you guys are getting what I'm saying. Okay. Introduce the feel of your story. Okay. A thriller, action movie, a comedy. If it's a comedy, people should be laughing. They should know that it's a comedy, right? But this is where you're going to introduce the genre and the theme and the feel. Give them a vibe of your story right here in your setup. You're setting up your story, okay? And you're going to introduce your central conflict, which comes mainly from your inciting incident, okay? Everybody got that?
No.
Wonderful. Okay, here's our first major plot point. Okay, our plot point, if you recall, is something significant that happens to your protagonist and to your story. What happens, happens within your story that spins the action in a different direction. Okay, this is what gives your audience that surprise factor. Something significant, something big. It has to be substantial, right? Your story is moving along. You have your conflict. You have your, your protagonist trying to solve whatever case, and then something huge happens here that spins the story in a different direction. All right. Keep your audience guessing. That's where this first plot point goes. All right. Does anybody have any questions on any of this right here? All right.
So I had a question.
Sure.
So I want to ask you, sometimes like scripts are taken off of to convert into films. So how do you adjust that? They take, like, stories are taken from novels and they are made into movies, right? So basically,
Stories are taken from where?
From novels and books.
Oh yeah, I have a novel that was made into a movie.
Yes. So how do you come about it?
How do you go about making a novel into a book?
Yeah.
Okay.
A novel into a film.
A novel into a, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, a novel into a film.
Yeah.
That is called an adaptation.
Okay.
And what typically happens is you're going to take the heart of that book and you're going to put that into the screenplay, because obviously your book has everything in it. Your book has emotion, I'm sorry, let me take that back. Your book has feelings and thoughts, and it has all the flowery language, the descriptive language that we use to be able to paint our pictures in our minds, to be able to follow along with that story so that it can come alive to us. Your film is stripped down. You don't have any feelings, and you can't just say that a character feels this way in a screenplay. You can't just say that a character thinks this way in a screenplay. So to adapt something, you're taking the heart, the streamlined heart of that story or that book, and then you're putting it into the structure of a screenplay. And then typically you're going to put the subplots in there to support your, obviously, the same characters and all those things. But there's a lot that needs to be stripped away in order for it to be able to be chunked down into a 90-minute, an hour and 50-minute movie. But typically you're just taking the main plot, and then maybe your subplot, your main characters, and then you're putting them into a screenplay format. It's honestly, for me, it's not very difficult to do. I've done that for other people with their short stories. But yeah, you're just taking the heart of your story, the heart of that book, putting it in a screenplay formatting, and making sure you add the stuff to support it, especially for people that are fans of that material. They're going to be pretty upset if you do a horrible job adapting their prized book, their beloved book, and putting it into a film, and your film stinks, So, but that's the process. It's just taking that main story element, putting it into a screenplay formatting, putting in the supporting characters and the subplots. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Moving on. Here's Act 2. Yes. The conflict or confrontation. I just call it conflict. A lot of people just call it confrontation. 30 to 60 pages. All right. This is the main chunk of your film. This area right there, and you've heard me say it before. This is where most films fail, in the Act 2. in Act 2, the conflict or confrontation phase, because there is not enough conflict. Okay. And so I'm going to give you a great example of conflict. And I'm not trying to be all biblical or religious on anybody, so please don't get all offended or nothing like this. But here's a great example of conflict. If anybody has ever remembered the story of Job, Job got jacked up. That's conflict. Job, who had everything, he had money, he had cattle, he had camels, he had servants, he had a big family, everything. This is just a great example, and this is why I use it. Because someone who was going to film school said, I really don't understand conflict in the confrontation phase. And I'm like, it is honestly just problem after problem, challenge after challenge, obstacle after obstacle coming at your protagonist who is trying to meet his dramatic need. Okay. So for Job, he had it all. Then all of a sudden he's hanging out, and then a servant of his comes and says, hey, these guys come and raided us and they killed off everybody and they killed all the camels. We got nothing. I'm the only one that survived. And then soon as that servant left, another servant came running up and says, hey, we just got raided and they stole all our horses and they did all this and they killed everybody. And I'm the only one that survived. And soon as that person left, then another servant came and says, hey, a hurricane or a big wind came and knocked the house down and killed all your children. And I'm the only one that survived and I'm the only one left. And he goes taking off. That's conflict. That's confrontation. That will jack up your main character. And that's exactly what you guys are going to do in the confrontation and conflict phase. You're going to continue to bring assault after assault after assault on your main character. And that's mainly through our antagonist, whether it's the antagonist like Jaws, obviously the shark, the antagonist through the mayor. And thank you for, I think Sally brought that up, I think, because I can't see your faces, or conflict through having the fear of the water. All these things are going to play into trying to prevent your protagonist from meeting his dramatic need. Okay. So that's what happens in conflict. It's just constant assault against your protagonist. So the antagonist opposes protagonist, and it could be antagonists, plural. All right. And so here I'm just making notes. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. There's 14 cards each for a novel or for a feature film script. And you can also use this for a 60-minute television show, because this is just a story structure. Okay. I want you guys to understand that this is a story structure. You can put this in a novel, a feature film, or you can put it in a 60-minute television show. However, if you are putting this into a TV show, a 60-minute TV show, you're going to break it up into 5 acts, because typically they use a 5-act structure, but the storytelling is still the 3-act structure. Okay. And what you end up having, and I may have wrote it in another card. Actually, I didn't put that. Or maybe I did. Did I? 1 second. No, I didn't put it on here. So anyway, so what you end up having to create a 5-act structure, which is still this 3-act structure, because this is just beginning, middle, and end. It's just good storytelling. That's what this is. But when you have a 5-act structure for a 60-minute TV show, you have your teaser, because you guys are all used to watching TV shows. You have your teaser, and that lasts between 1 and maybe 5 pages. Most likely it'll be in the 3-page range. Then you have your Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and maybe Act 5. Actually, I did put it in there. Sheesh, I didn't even see it there. 60-minute TV, your teaser plus 4 or 5 acts. And I don't know if you could see this part right here. It just says it's this 3-act structure with breaks. This is where your commercials are going to happen. Okay. So a teaser, commercial, Act 1, commercial, Act 2, commercial. All right. Or advertisement now with the streaming services. Okay. So that's what that's why it's broken up into 5 acts, but it still follows the 3-act structure. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions on that? All right. Okay. So let me see. Now, if I were doing a 30-minute sitcom, I'm going to break my acts down, or I'm going to break my cards down to 7 cards. Just going to divide it. Because if you guys recall, this whole outline, we have 90 to 120 pages, 15 to 30, 30 to 60 pages here, 15 to 30. So if we stay on the longer or the shorter end, we have 15 pages, 30 pages, and 15 pages, which gives us 1 hour. That's why I still use this for a 60-minute television show. But if I wanted to break it down into a 30-minute sitcom, I would just use 7 cards. 7 cards for Act 1, 7 and 7 for Act 2, and 7 for my resolution. Okay. Now you guys can watch the replays to hear me say that again, but that's what I would do. Just 7 here, 7 and 7 here, and 7 here. And it gives me a format for good storytelling. That's all this is, a structure for good storytelling. And it'll give me a rough amount of page count for a 30-minute sitcom, which can run from 22 to 35 pages, depending. If you're not a seasoned writer, they don't want to see 35 pages for a 30-minute. If you're not a seasoned writer, the more experience you have, the more known you are, you're able to get away with things that other people can't get away with. Same thing with 60-minute television shows, which can go in the range of 55 minutes to 65 minutes. Some people even go 70 and 80 for some pages, but those are all established writers. Okay. That's what we stay away from when we're starting out. So we 55 to about 63 or 65 pages. But again, if you're writing for television, you have to look at scripts that are specific to the genre that you're looking at, or potentially, dang, is that a word? Potentially? What the heck? I don't know where that came from. But either way, if it's a specific show that you might be wanting to write for, then you want to look at how they structure theirs. Okay, does that make sense? Because there's no way to explain all that and give you some specifics because they vary so much. Even when it comes to shows that are on the paid channels, the HBOs, the Showtimes, and stuff that don't have advertisements in it, then you're not going to see the breaks. You're going to write your project as if it was a film. You're just going to use the 3-act structure to tell a great story because they're not going to have a break, even though you're doing a 60-minute television show. Game of Thrones is a great example, okay? Because there's no breaks in Game of Thrones, obviously, but they just write like a film nowadays. And this is a good structure for telling stories. All right. Does anybody have any questions? All right, moving right along. Okay, in the conflict phase, I have right here, protagonist gains ground and he loses ground. So through your conflict phase, the protagonist is going to accomplish things. He's going to make progress. But then the antagonist, whatever it is, it's a physical person, or whether it's depression, because since we brought that up, or mental illness, since we brought that up, it could be internal or it can be external, but those are going to defeat your protagonist. But then your protagonist is going to overcome those challenges, and it's going to be essentially a back and forth as the level of opposition increases. Okay, I think I said that pretty clearly. As you progress through Act 2, the level of opposition is going to increase as you move along. Okay, so when you start off here and here, since I'm on this point right here, I will say this in all honesty, people don't normally put a plot point to spin things in a different direction here. I do it personally, okay? And if it turns out that it's too much in my story, then I simply take it away. It's as simple as that. People typically don't put a plot point here to spin the action in a different direction. So I'm saying this for the record. I do. And this could show up here, or it could show up closer on this end. Same thing with this. If I want to have a major plot point, people can be expecting it here. I made to introduce it sooner. It's up to me. But here is a good guideline, is to say, when you get to this card, make sure that there's a major plot point here. This one is optional for Trevor L. Smith, okay? And I typically put that in my writing, and I have not extracted one since. If I need to tone something down, then I'll tone it down. But I do put stuff here, but that is specific to me. This whole thing is something that was really made well-known and utilized by Sid Field, okay? That dude rocks, okay? And this is where the second plot point happens in the way that he formulates his storytelling, okay? So that's just for the record. I do this. This is where most do it, plot point 1 and plot point 2, because plot point 1, when that main plot point happens, it spins it in a different direction to lead me to the conflict phase. Same thing with plot point number 2. It spins the direction around or spins the action around. It just throws the audience off to lead us into act 3, okay? I do this for fun. That's just me. All right, so now that we're moving into act 2, this is where the antagonist, or antagonists, plural, turns up the opposition for our protagonist. And it just continues to escalate. So I hope you guys are following along here, okay? The protagonist's character arc is forced by the conflict, okay? He's going to start to change. He's going to have his ups and downs. He's going to have his victories and his defeats. As the antagonist turns up the opposition, the same thing's going to happen. Levels of opposition will begin to increase, and this character is going to change, okay? But there's also change that happens through our Yoda characters, and I'm just throwing that out there. Yoda and Luke, right? Him just simply getting that wisdom from Yoda changed Luke, okay? Same thing with Miyagi-Do, right? Miyagi-Do and Daniel-san, and the wisdom that Miyagi implanted. It was not just the antagonist that changed Daniel. It was not just the bullies that were coming after him. Yes, that made him want to take karate and learn to defend himself. Yes, he got stronger. Yes, he got better and he practiced. But it was that wisdom also that Miyagi-san and Miyagi-Do imparted into Daniel that caused him to also have his character arc. Does that make sense, you guys? So you can introduce your You can introduce your Yoda characters. You can introduce a Miyagi character. They could be one of your supporting characters and impart some wisdom that can help your character to change. All right. And so here is just escalation. Okay. Just the ups and downs. Okay. But when you get around to the second plot point, this is what happens generally with your character. They are overcome and they essentially feel defeated. Okay. We'll get completely stripped away here, but this is where it's just like, dang, that antagonist or those antagonists are really pummeling your protagonist. And this character is going to have the appearance of being defeated. Here's your next major plot point, your official one. This spins the action in a different direction, which brings us into our resolution phase. Okay. And in our resolution phase, 15 to 30 pages. Here, unbearable conflict strips protagonist of everything. This character's done. This character does not feel that he can go on anymore. He cannot reach this dramatic need. What he was longing for, he cannot achieve. Okay. This is where we're going to get that sense from this character that he loses everything. But his character arc comes into play and he finds some newfound strength. Something that this character did not have before that we instilled in him through this process of storytelling. So this cannot magically appear out of nowhere. No one can magically appear and just help your character to overcome this final showdown, this conflict here. This cannot happen. We need to see some type of development, some type of investment into your protagonist, some type of change that occurs, that when this newfound strength comes into play, it makes sense to us. We understand where he got it from and how those deposits. We might not understand how he's going to utilize those things, because that might be a surprise to us, but he is going to find some newfound strength in this once he's defeated and stripped away of everything. Okay. These cards are left blank because that's essentially what all of this is for. This does not mean that it happens here. This is just where I just happened to write the note, guys. That's why this is not a formula. This is not something, oh, plug this in here, plug this in here, plug this in here. This is not what these cards are for. This is not what I'm trying to communicate, because I don't want anybody ripping on me saying, oh, that dude's dumb, he's just giving you a formula. This is not that. I'm just writing notes, and I'm writing them on a card. This does not necessarily have to happen here. It could happen here. It could happen here. It could happen here, but I needed to write it somewhere. Hello, right? So as we move along in the resolution phase, we're going to have the protagonist and the antagonist have the final showdown. This is the ultimate battle. This is what you've been setting up. Okay. And you guys know that ultimate battle in Jaws, right? But this is where the final showdown happens. So in Act 3, the resolution, this is how your story resolves. Okay. This is how it resolves. It does not necessarily have to happen on the final scene of your film or your story or your television show. This can happen here, and then you could just have some loose ends you want to tie up here. Okay. But this is how your story resolves in the resolution phase. Okay. Now, in the resolution phase, guess what? It's just like a good joke. You set up your jokes so that you can have your payoff. In Acts 1, 2, and 3, you're going to set up your story, set up your characters, set up different events so you can pay them off in Act 3. You have your setups and your payoffs. Sometimes you can watch a story all the way through and you're thinking, dang, this is slow. I'm sure you guys have all seen films like that or stories like that, and you read it and it's just slow, those slow burn type of stories. But then when you get into Act 3 and things are beginning to piece together, you're floored because of everything that happens, and the way that it happens is because they took all this time to set up the story to pay it off right here. Okay. So you have your setups and your payoffs in Act 3. The questions that are asked in Act 1 and Act 2 are now answered in Act 3. Those are things where you're saying, but what about this? And what about that? They're answered here in Act 3. You're going to introduce things. You're going to set things up in your first 2 acts. You're going to pay them off here. You're going to ask questions or make the audience ask questions about this character, about that character. And then those questions get answered here. Is every question answered? No, because sometimes you might want to leave things open to continue on after your story ends. Okay. But your story gets resolved. Doesn't mean it have to have a happy ending, but your story is going to be resolved in a satisfactory way. Your audience may not be happy with you, but they're going to be like, oh, okay, I wish it ended this way, but okay, I get it. Does that make sense? This is your final scene or the end of your story. All right. So we made it all the way through, and it's coming up on 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. I must be hungry. I want to cook something. Anyway, so I'm going to turn this off real quick, and then I will post this whole thing. If you found it useful, you can go and grab it in the Legacy Street Writers Facebook group. Okay. So I want to see your faces again. My goodness, that is so hard talking to nobody. I can't stand it. I was like twitching. I don't know if could you guys see me or just see the cards? You guys could see me? Oh my gosh, dude, I'm so sorry. I didn't get to see your faces, so that kind of stunk. But it's just now 8 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions that they want answered? I know I went through a lot of those things, but you can always watch the replays and you can always ask questions in the Legacy Street Writers group. Here's the thing. If you guys ask me a question, I want to shoot more of those little short videos, the little 5-minute ones. So if you guys ask me a question, maybe it'll be a good video for me to be able to answer on, so I can get a little bit more in depth. So I would love it if you guys did that. So ask away. Don't be shy.